this series, Winning, and the first week we began by learning about the Genesis principle. We talked about the fact that we are going to be going through a couple of principles that are going to help us change the way we live our lives if we are going to succeed in this year and going forward. And we began by the Genesis principles. We saw the things that God did to manage the world, the earth, and he separated the chaos that was in the world, and he organized it. And we say that we need to prioritize. We need to create rhythms in our lives. We need to prioritize the things in our lives and put them in order so that we can be able to win. The next week we learned the boundary principle, and we saw that when God created the heavens and the earth, he created a boundary line so that even the most powerful waves will not surpass it. And we say that we need to draw boundaries around our lives so that we can win in life. Last Sunday, we learned from the example of Jesus, who had numerous things to do. This person had many things to do, and he only had to do it in 3 years. And we say that we need to unplug in life so that we can succeed. Because Jesus Christ withdrew, not because there was no more work to do, not because there was nothing else to do or nothing else to teach, but Jesus withdrew because he knew what his purpose was. He knew what he was called to do. And we say that if you want to win in life, you must know when to unplug. Let me just quote a story of someone who did this last week, and they say that, so for me, the unplug started on Sunday night after the sermon. Remember, I gave you guys a challenge. How many tried the challenge? Okay. How many honestly can say, I failed? Okay, those are honest people in the church. Thank you very much. We are a real church right here. You know, so for me, the unplugs started on Sunday night after the sermon. I turned off my WhatsApp and deactivated my Facebook. Deactivated the Facebook. Wow. And my, what a great week it has been. With no TV being turned on, bonding time with a husband became more meaningful and intimate. I read books that I had been putting off reading for the longest time. I did an at-home facial. Wow. And of course, got so much more sleep and just generally looked up and actually listened when people were talking, as my nose wasn't constantly in my phone, checking WhatsApp. I could actually get used to this. Wow. How many of us switched off their WhatsApp? Switched off their phone at 6 p.m. Okay, 2-3 people. That's fine. Okay, that's good. For those of you who are not there, please visit mavuno.downtown.wordpress.com. I've posted the sermon there. You'll understand what we're talking about. And even the other sermons are there for this month. Let me begin by a story. A story about land. A story is told about a man who was a farmer and wanted to buy land. And he did not have enough where he was. So he decided, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to sell this land that I have. And I've heard of this particular place in this country where I can buy as much land as I can because it is rich in farming. So he sold his land, traveled to this country, this village. He met this chief, and the chief told him, you can actually buy as much land as you want. And the guy was like, you know, I don't think he understands what I'm talking about. Are you trying to say that with 100,000, I can be able, because he had 100,000, he sold his land for 100,000. Are you trying to say that with 100,000, I can be able to buy as much land as I want? And the chief said, yes. With 100,000, you can be able to buy as much land as you want. So let's meet tomorrow in the morning before sunrise, and I'll explain to you what the conditions are. So they met, and they climbed this hill. It wasn't a very steep hill. And what the chief said is that, okay, look at this land up to the horizon. All this land is available for you to buy for 100,000. The only condition is that you need to walk the whole land that you want to buy. So the guy was like, okay, that's easy. So the chief said, he put his hat down and he said, this is the starting point. You need to walk around, come back, and when you get here before sunset, then all the land that you've walked on is your land. So the guy removed his 100,000, put it in his hat, and he started walking. In fact, when the sun rose, he started running at a fast pace. He walked and walked and walked and walked. Noon came, and he thought to himself, okay, I've walked enough. In fact, he walked to a place where he couldn't even see the hill and where the chief was and the villagers were. So he decided, you know what, let me start circling and going back so that I can at least get a considerable amount. But he thought to himself, let me just walk a bit faster so that I can get more land. After all, who wouldn't do that? Okay? So he started walking, and at 3 p.m., he still couldn't see the hill where the chief was. So he started running frantically. And he got to a certain place at 5 p.m. He still couldn't see the hill where the chief was. And finally, when it's like 5 minutes to 6, he could see the hill, but now how the hill was structured is that he had to go into a valley and then go up. So this guy knew 5 minutes to 6, definitely where I am standing right now, the sun is going to set any minute now. But then as he was standing there, he thought to himself, where the chief is standing, the sun is still there. It hasn't set. So let me do this. Let me run very quickly. Let me try and do this so that I can get there in time. And the guy started running, and the villagers started cheering him. They're like, run, 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 you can make it. And the guy was motivated, and he ran, and just before the sun set, he took a dive, and he touched his heart. And he had his land. Wow. What is the moral of the story? And the chief told him, you know what, now arise and look at the land that you have. But the man's servant came to try and lift him up, and the guy was dead. Wow. Moral of the story. Are we any different to this guy? Are we any different? Maybe our pursuits are not about wealth or land. Maybe some of you are sitting there and thinking this Lukenya land, and they're like, yeah, let's just move on. But we've been unable to show the wisdom to restrain when it comes to restraining. We want to be super everything now. We want all the trinkets of life now, to be super workers, to be these great people in this great nation. But once you start living that life, you cannot stop. As we look at this man, he couldn't stop. It takes over, it consumes you, and the faster you run, the harder it becomes for you to stop. Your life spins out of control until one day it's too late because your life is in a mess. We are living lives that are completely overextended, overloaded, and pushing our lives to the absolute limits. And in the process, ignoring any warning signs in our lives. The technology and modernization, which is supposed to make our lives easier, has actually left us more complicated than when it found us right here. Our lives have become more hectic than it was back in the day. We live our lives like rubber bands, stretched to our limits, to the absolute limit, holding on for dear life. When it comes to our time, we chop it up into as many pieces as we possibly can, scheduling as many things into it as we can, and allocating every single minute of it. So we throw in tasks, deadlines, meetings, appointments, coffee dates, all these things are thrown into our time. When it comes to our finances, there is always more month at the end of the money. We spend every single coin that comes in, and sometimes spend even more than we have coming in at the end of the month. And we end up almost literally crawling to the next paycheck. With our energy, we try to squeeze in as many activities as possible. We try to manage as many tasks as possible. And then by the time we are coming to the end of the day, we are so tired, we are so exhausted that we have nothing left to those who are close to us. But some of us are not to blame because this is the society that we live in. We live in a culture that constantly pushes us to the limit and tells us you can do it all, you can be it all, you can live it all. You only live, you only have one life, live it. Life is not a rehearsal. But there's a danger in living life like that. The first thing that I see, it affects your relationships. And I've been saying this throughout the 4 weeks. All relationships take time. They take time to invest. But because we are so overextended, we are skimming through life. We don't have time to sit and invest in each other. You know, there are friends, when you think about it, there are friends back in the day who used to fill your life with color and energy. But now it has become difficult for you to spend time with them because you're busy. Those who are married, let me speak to those who are married here. You rarely have quality time with your spouse because now your conversations have become about work, that colleague, that boss, rent, the loans, the mortgages, and house helps. You only talk about and attend to what is urgent because you have no time for the important. And this is what our life has become. We only attend to the urgent because anything else that is important can be taken care of later. It robs us of our joy. And here's the other thing. When it comes to work, you are becoming more, or rather less and less productive. You do not have any more time to edify yourself. You do not even read more books. You do not exercise. You don't even just do the recreational stuff that will build you up and make you a better person. So if these are the lives that we are living, what then do we do? How do we ensure that we are not pushing our lives to the absolute limit and live unbalanced lives? This week we want to learn from the wisest man who ever lived. His name was King Solomon. You know, my son says King Somolon. So in case I say Somolon, please forgive me. He wrote a number of books referred to as wisdom books, and in them he gave little nuggets of wisdom to teach us how to live successfully. Now, we're going to read from a very short passage of scripture, but one that has some powerful truths that we can unpack. And this is Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 2. And this is what it says: divide what you have into 7 parts, or even 8, because you don't know what disaster may befall you. The context of this passage is financial. Solomon is urging us to divide what we earn into many portions. This is what it's saying. He's saying, so that even if disaster strikes, you always have extra. You always have something that you can run to. He's saying you need to put a little aside for the day may come when the unexpected will happen. In other words, Solomon is teaching a very important principle that I call today the margin principle. Margin is the space that exists between the load you are carrying and your limit. Let me explain. The load represents the things that you do on a day-to-day basis. This is your work, your relationships, your obligations, everything that you do on a day-to-day basis. Your limit represents your tipping point. That when you get to the place where you cannot be able to do these things anymore, that's the place that you tip over. Okay? The challenge for many of us is that we live marginless lives. We don't have that space in between the loads that we are carrying and the tipping point. There is no that space. In fact, we live at the tipping point. Okay? Our schedules are so packed, there is no reserve and barely room to breathe. We have aligned all our obligations like tightly packed dominoes, and with no margin of error. If one thing goes wrong, if one area of your life goes wrong, it's bound to have a domino effect, and everything else will fall. We have built our lives with no allowance for the unexpected. What Solomon is telling us is, do not consume every resource you have, whether financial, emotional, or professional, for the time will come when you need that margin. This is what he's saying to us. In other words, he's saying, to win in life, build margins. And the first margin that I want you to look at today is the time margin. All this begins by how we schedule our days. Firstly, it has been said that most people underestimate the time required to get a job done by 30%. You know very well that this job is going to take me about 4 hours to do. But what do? Because we want to impress the other person, we say, this one, I'll do it in 3 hours. So what happens is that you run helter-skelter trying to accomplish this work in 3 hours. You set out to do 10 things in a day. You have this to-do list of about 10 things. And 2 of those tasks that you have there involve you commuting from Thika Road to Ngong Road. So what happens? Eventually, at the end of the day, you'll get home and you have accomplished only 3 things out of your to-do list. And you end up being frustrated. Am I talking to somebody? We leave for a 2 p.m. meeting at 1:45 p.m. And you know very well it's going to take you more than 30 minutes to get where you are supposed to be going. Am I speaking to somebody? And the slightest hint of delay, if there is traffic, if the matatu even decides to delay a bit because they are trying to carry every other passenger who's passing by, or because you drove your car on E all through till the office, and you want to enter the petrol station and put some fuel, 100 bob to get you to your point B, and the petrol station attendant does not come in due time, who want to him because you'll speak prophetic words to him. Another thing is that we turn into creative storytellers. You've all heard of this. Maybe you're in a bus somewhere, or you even know yourselves. You know, and I remember one day I was in a bus, and I'm assuming the person at the other end of the line was asking this guy where he was. And of course, this guy said, you know what? I'm at Ngong Road. I'm along Ngong Road. I'll be there in a few minutes. Now, when someone says Ngong Road and you're in town, what do you think? You think probably they're around Prestige to Kenyatta. So they will be there in a few minutes. What they neglect to tell you is that they just left Ngong Town, which is technically Ngong Road. So they're not really lying. They've just omitted a small part of the truth. This is what usually happens. I want to urge us, can we plan our day in blocks? This is what I mean. The sooner you appreciate the fact that the 10 things you are trying to fulfill in the day, or you're trying to accomplish in the day, will not happen, the easier your life will become. The reality is that there will almost always be a gap between the things that you've set out to do and the things that you actually do. True? There'll always be a gap between the things that you set out to do in the morning and the things that you actually accomplish by the end of the day. Plan each day in blocks, leaving at least one block and schedule. Let me explain. For instance, say you decide to start your day at 8:30 in the morning, and you can plan your blocks in 1.5 hours to 2 hours, 2-hour blocks. Say your work day starts at 8:30, so your first block will be 8:30, let's say, till 10:30. And then let me encourage you to have breaks in between, because breaks help you to process what you've come out of and prepare yourself to the next event or the next meeting that you're going into. So the second block will probably begin at around 11, because you can give yourself a 30-minute block. Now, these are just examples that I'm giving to you. You can use it. If it applies to your work schedule, that's fine. If not, then probably you can try and customize it to make it work for you. Then maybe the second block will be from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. And you can even decide to take an early lunch if your work allows you. The third block after lunch will be 1:30 to 3 p.m. And then the final block will be 3:30 to 5 p.m. So in actual sense, you can plan your day with 2 blocks in the morning and 2 blocks in the afternoon. Am I with you? Are we together up to that point? So you have 4 blocks in a day. Now, leave one block totally unscheduled. You can decide, maybe because I'm very productive in the morning, I can do all my work in the morning and leave one unscheduled, or vice versa. Leave one. The fourth becomes your margin. The one block that you leave out, if it is a 3:30 to 5, that becomes your margin. So that if any crisis arises, if any meeting, random meeting, and you know some of us work in the companies where people just love meeting and meeting and meeting. If any meeting arises, then you have margin that you've created for yourself. And you're not trying to figure out, okay, I had promised Nani to meet him at this particular point, but you actually have a block of time that you can be able to slot in whatever has come up, the unexpected. This is one of the ways that I think we can build our margins when it comes to time. I think it's practical and we can apply it, because to win in life, build margins. You may not be able to accomplish all of this today, but it requires some form of training, some form of commitment to get this done. Because here's the thing. You will not get there unless you have goals. If you haven't lived like this, you may not be able to flip a switch today and change. I'm not saying that now go home and switch on this switch of discipline and change. But you need to start somewhere. Maybe you have a difficult boss. You may not be able to do this, change your time. Maybe your class schedule has already been set and it's impossible for you to do this. But you need to start somewhere. Start with one day at least this week. I'm not asking you now to change your life forever. But start one day at a time, one moment at a time. Do as much as you can. Create as much margin time as you possibly can. The second margin that I want us to create is the emotional margin. Another area of life where we need to build margin is our emotions. This is very critical. Let me explain. Do you ever find yourself being rude with people? Okay, not you. Do you know people who are rude with people? Are there times when you feel that every person who's coming near you is just irritating? Okay, I've had a few yeses. Do you find yourself snapping or scolding those close to you? Hallelujah. Tumeokoka, tunampenda Bwana. Chances are that your emotional reservoir is off, or even nearing empty. There is nothing that is left there in your emotional tank. And your emotional energy is billas, nothing. And I'm asking us to build our margins. Some of us are living so close to the edge in our lives, and with such little emotional reserves, the least bit of emotional upheaval, That if anyone was going to suggest something, in fact, for some of us, even if your friend even thinks to upset you, you can even tell from a mile away. Usinikaribie leo. You know, it can be a fight with the boss. It can be a marital spat. It can be probably you just get home and maybe you have your housemate and they just irritate you. Or they're just people who just tire you. These are enough to throw our lives into a complete tailspin. And the challenge with life is you cannot determine when emotional upheaval will occur. That's the thing. We can never determine when we're going to lose a loved one. You can never determine that today I'm going to fight with my boss. We don't determine these things. The conflicts just arise from anywhere. They just come very unexpectedly. And we need to have an emotional tank that is filled up all the time, from which we can withdraw the emotional energy. And if you're running on empty or your emotions are low, then you're on the verge of an emotional breakdown. To build your margins emotionally, start by doing things that deposit great amounts into the emotional reserve. For some of us, we get charged when we play sports. For some of us, we get charged when we are reading books or when we hang out with friends or when we cook, spend time by ourselves. Like I get charged by just spending time by myself. You find that after a session of these activities, you are energized and ready for the day's activities or the day's challenges. Do you know what fills your tank? Conversely, there are things that drain your tank. And when you engage in them, you feel wasted. For some of us, it's long meetings. For some of us, it's going to work. You're working at the wrong place. In fact, quit. For some of us, it's just, there are needy people in our workplace who are just there. You know, for some of us, it's just workplace conflict, relational challenges. These things are just draining from your emotional reservoir. Then there are things that we do we think adds to our reservoir. But really, they just make silent withdrawals. Some of us, we feel like, you know what, I've had such a hard day. You know, let me just go and unwind and recharge before the TV. You know, and we want to watch movies, series. You know, Jack is back. Social media. You know, let me just do some extended browsing and I'll be recharged. What you don't know is that actually you're making silent withdrawals from your emotional tank. To build margins emotionally, avoid things that withdraw from your emotional tank and schedule in your day things or people who will deposit in that tank. Think about the things that recharge you. Think about the things that will deposit in your emotional reservoir. Because to win in life, build margins. The last margin that I want to talk about is financial. Financial is very critical. It's a very critical area that we need to build margins. Because we all know issues to do with our finances can cause us sleepless nights. That's true. It can give us ulcers. It can cause us to have nightmares when the unexpected comes. And most of us have learned the fine art of living beyond our means. We've perfected that art. In fact, some of us, we consume all of it, if not more than what we earn. And somehow, I don't know how we get more. I don't know. Anyway, this means that on a good month, you're probably rolling along reasonably well, stretching every shilling to pay bills. Some you'll delay, pay them later. You know, you pay your rent, your food, your fees. And then you literally crawl to the end of the month. You're surviving. In fact, now, when is the date? Even the bankers have not been paid. Things are thick. The challenge comes when that's why there's no traffic. That's true. The challenge comes when you're blindsided by an unexpected financial emergency. Maybe your rent is hiked unexpectedly. Okay? A regular source of income falls through. Or for those of us who are privileged to drive, that month 3 knocks you off. Man, those dents can be irritating. Or maybe one of your parents or your guardians, they're in need of urgent medical attention. And you find that you have to give something. Something drastic has to happen. Many people end up in debt to finance the unexpected. The most important margin you can set out financially is what I call the emergency fund. Let me just use this as an example. There are very many other examples that you can pick up there. Maybe, and I'm not making assumptions. I know that there are people who are actually doing a great job at this. You've invested in very many places, and I applaud you for that. But if you're there and you haven't done this, then an emergency fund is a good thing. This is a fairly liquid fund where you set aside the equivalent of 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses. And this is only touched when you have an emergency. Now, paying for DSTV is not an emergency. You know, we cannot control the future, but we can set up a buffer for it. Realize that if you do not have such a fund, it will take time and discipline to get it going. And your best bet is to start small. You know, start by accumulating. Try to accumulate 1 month's expense. Because even the ones who have the 3 to 6 months emergency fund, they didn't do it at one go. Unless they are very disciplined ones who did that. But try, maybe even start by saving a few hundred shillings in a saving account that you will not have access to. Start by putting money aside, little by little. Get to the 1 month buffer. Get to the 2 month buffer. Get to the 3 month buffer. And if you can continue, then keep on going with that. Because to win in life, you need to build margins. The important thing is to start putting something aside and make it a habit. Because once you make it a habit, then you learn to live without that money, one way or the other. You know, someone once said a very harsh thing. He said this: old fools used to be young fools. What he was really saying was, if you see someone advanced in years making poor decisions, he started making those decisions when he was younger, many years ago. The most dangerous part of someone like this, or a series like this, is the fact that a lot of us agree with what I'm talking about. A lot of us are in the place or space where I'm talking about. But the sad thing is that you will go back to your workplace, you'll go back to your home, and nothing changes. And you know, majority of us here are young. We're in our 30s, early 30s, others late 20s, early 20s. And my prayer is that you will not hear these truths right now. And 20, 30 years from now, you are still living life hectic as you are right now, or even worse as you are right now. So as we close, allow me to give us another challenge for this week. And here are the challenges. I think these are things that, they are slightly easier than the ones for last week. Okay? So relax. The first thing is buffer your time. Okay? Plan your schedule in 2-hour blocks, beginning this week. If you have really that role, if you have the authority to be able to manage your time, do that. If you're not, try and discuss it even with your supervisor. And begin by being on time. That's very critical. You can plan the 2-hour blocks, but then you show up 30 minutes later. You know, we have this, it's almost a policy at Mavuno. We haven't really effected it as part of the policy. But we always say that if a meeting starts at 9 and you get there at 9, you are late. If you get there 10 minutes before 9, then you are on time. What if you say that beginning this week, I am going to get to all my meetings 10 minutes before time? Try that. See how it works. Because by the time you get there 10 minutes before, it allows you to prepare yourself and begin to plan, and even thinking through what the meeting is going to be about. And if you're coming from another meeting, those 10 minutes, however few they are, they can give you time to process where you have come from and what you're going to do in the next meeting. Can I even say, come to church on time? I just thought I'd throw that in there. So we start at 10:20 for all of you, not 10:30. Okay? Okay, you guys, I know it's your day to sleep, but that's fine. Begin your emergency fund. That's the second thing that I want you to do. If you don't already have an emergency fund, begin this week. If you have to open a savings account, if you don't even want to open a savings account, I think there is Mshwari. I don't know how the technicalities of Mshwari, and I'm not marketing here. I just don't know how it works, but try something as simple as that. You can be saving your money in Mshwari. Start with, even if it's 50 bob, 100 bob, 200 bob. You know, those coins that you put in there, open something that you can begin to put aside some money, however small it is or however large it is. And you know what? My prayer is that we can come back and even share our experiences. The last thing is this. Boost your energy. I want you that this afternoon, I want you to take a list of the things. If you're not able to do this on your own, ask your friend to walk with you. But I want you to take a list of, write down a list of the things that energize you. Or people who energize you. For some of us, we are energized by people. And all the sanguines in the house said? But here is the thing. I want you to write down a list of the things that energize you. And then go back. When you are sitting at home alone, no TV on, no phones on, just plan them through the week. If you can, if you're disciplined enough to even do through the month, plan it during the month. And put things that energize you in between the weeks and the days. So that you can continue boosting your energy as you continue. For some of you, probably it's just a sporting activity. Maybe you can say, every Saturday morning, I will go with some of my pals. Call some of your pals and go together. For some of you, it's cooking. Call us. We'll come and eat the food. We will enjoy. For some of us, eating energizes us. We will enjoy. But just find out, what is it that energizes you? What is it that boosts your energy? And then include that in your week. I want to conclude with a story. The story is told of a company that was looking for truck drivers. And so they had the applicants bring in their application. And all these guys came and they were shortlisted to 3 people who seemed very competent. And they tested them on the board. They tested them asking questions about science and all that. And all the theory they passed. Now they had to do the practicals. And the first driver got into the truck and he thought, you know what, I'm going to do my best to impress this instructor. So they drove, and when they approached a certain cliff, he thought, you know, the only way I can impress this guy, because everyone else is going to do the normal thing. Let me drive as close as I can to the edge. You know, let me in fact drive 1 foot close to the edge. So he did that, and he maintained the speed. He was constant. He maintained the distance between him and the truck and the edge, and he made it through. And he thought to himself, I have this job. There is no one who can beat what I've done. The second driver, not knowing that the first driver did the same thing that he was planning to do, did the exact same thing. But now he thought, okay, now let me just do it half a foot. This guy thought a foot. He thought, let me do half a foot. Let me show this guy that I can do this. Went up the cliff, made it, and he thought to himself, I have this job. I got this. No one else can beat me. The third driver and the final driver, when he got to the cliff, he thought to himself, hey, I know I only live once, but let me stay as far as I can from the edge of the cliff. And he stayed 10 feet away from the edge of the cliff. And he went up the hill, and he made it to the end, and he thought to himself, you know what, I'm not sure whether I've gotten the job, but better to be safe than sorry. Who do you think got the job? The what? The first one. The last one. It is the one who drove 10 feet from the cliff. Because no good company, no chief executive officer will sit and think, I will dare risk my truck at 6 inches or 12 inches off the cliff, filled with goods. For a man to be taking those sorts of risks, he's nothing but a nutcase. So the 2 drivers lost it. This is what the principle number 4 is all about. You don't live life at the edge of the cliff. Have the wisdom to move away from the edge, so that when the unexpected happens, when the inevitable happens, you do not tip over. That if there's a bump in life, if anything happens and probably there's a tire burst, you do not tip over. You are far away enough from the edge that you are not in danger. Are there margins in your life? Are there margins in your time? Are there margins in your emotions? Are there margins in your finances? Or are you living as close as you can to the edge in such a way that if anything was to happen, you will tip over? I want us to pray. To win in life, build margins.